So, our first part of phrasal verbs. So we're doing a phrasal verb workshop today, and we've just decided, well, I've decided, to look at the different types of phrasal verbs before we go into the really tough work this afternoon. Maybe the easy work, how about that? So we have 4 types of phrasal verbs in the English language. Firstly, we have what we call the type 1 phrasal verbs. They're with a verb and a preposition, which is how we structure all phrasal verbs. But type 1 don't have any object. So they're very short, like look out, or sit down, stand up, do this, do that. Very short, normally instructional phrasal verbs where we don't ask somebody to do something. It's more like an order or a warning. Then we have type 2 and type 3, which are the separable and inseparable phrasal verbs. When we have a phrasal verb that we can actually separate and put an object in the middle, here's a great example. He turned on the light. Here's the phrasal verb, and here is the object of the sentence. But for some phrasal verbs, we can actually take the object and put it in between the phrasal verb. So he turned on the light, he turned it on, or he turned the light on. You can still use the whole object if you want to, but most people, when they open up the phrasal verb and put the object in the middle, most people will change the actual object into some sort of a pronoun. That's just the typical way we would speak. But you don't have to do that. Inseparable cannot be separated. I'm looking for my glasses. You could, of course, change the object. You could say, I'm looking for them. But you can't say, I'm looking them for. So some phrasal verbs are structured and you cannot separate them. You cannot change them. You cannot play with them. You have to keep them in the structure that they are already in. And finally, we have verbs with a number of different prepositions after them. These are the type 4 prepositions, and they also can't be opened up and played with. They're very fixed and structured. So I get on well with my parents. I'm looking forward to the show later on, for example. You cannot play about with that. You cannot take the object and try to slot it anywhere. The other thing we were looking at was the difference between literal and idiomatic phrasal verbs. Now this is really important. Literal phrasal verbs, when we look out of the window, or I take off my clothes, or I go to the shops, they're very literal. It's a physical movement that usually happens with them. But it's the idiomatic phrasal verbs that usually have 1 or 2 or 3 or more different meanings. So this is something that I do mostly on my grammar classes when we pick a particular verb and we look at all of the different phrasal verb structures that we can use, and we look at using the same preposition for many different meanings. So this is important. You can look out of the window, or I could say look out, which actually doesn't mean look out of the window or look out of something. It means be careful. This is one we had today. Literal, I could take off my clothes. I'm not going to do it now. Or the plane can take off. The plane can leave the ground and fly off. So this is just a summary of how we use and structure phrasal verbs. It's good to look at that before we move into deeper language, especially because I'll be saying, you know, how do you use that phrasal verb literally? How do we use that idiomatically? Can you separate it? I might be asking these questions as we go through our workshop day. Thank you.